Hi everyone, Russ of Aquarimax here. We recently reached 15,000 subscribers and I'm really grateful for that. I'm really excited, and on the community page I asked if I should do an animal/room tour for 15,000 subscribers, and over 90% of you said yes. So here we go. Well, first off, this is really more of an animal tour than a room tour because not all of my animals fit in this room, but I would like to give you kind of an overview of the pet room or the critter room or the bug room or whatever you want to call it. Up here I've got various supplies in bins to keep things organized. It really helps me if I've got them up there. I don't need to get them down every day, so I keep them up on the top shelf. And then on these other shelves I've got all kinds of things, and we'll be going into more detail about what's here, but just to give you kind of a look, I've got all kinds of cultures going on. I've got enclosures. I've even got storage space, especially on the lower levels, just things that I'm storing down there. And then we'll move over here. We've got the 40-gallon breeder vivarium where the corn snake is going to go eventually when I set up a bioactive enclosure there. My multis are just under there on the stand. Made a recent video about those. And then my daphnia amphipod culture right here. Let's take a closer look here. You can just check that out. We'll talk about that in more detail as well. And then my multi-tank, my endler tank. A lot of endlers in here. In fact, so many that I've had problems with algae because of the bioload, and I've been developing a solution for that with pothos, which we'll talk about more detail a little later. Over on these shelves, I've got some microworm cultures, other fish foods, chemicals, dechlorinator, that kind of thing, rubber bands and distilled water, various things like that. I move over here. On this shelf, I've got my shipping supplies up at the top, priority mailboxes, tape, packing paper, that sort of thing. Got my scale and my label maker. This is the shelf where I work on preparing things like packages to go out. I also use it for working on various projects. It's at a comfortable height when I'm standing up. And then here are my springtail cultures, as well as springtail food in a container for collecting springtails in. This shelf on the bottom here is going to be where I'm going to be moving the snake here shortly into his grow-out container until he gets big enough to go into the 40-gallon. And then at the bottom, this is where I store my pans that I use for sterilizing, or sanitizing, I should say, leaves and wood and soil for my millipedes and isopods. Then over here, I've got a cupboard that I store various storage space there, basically. And then here are my isopods and some more storage space, of course, in the closet. I've got some enclosures and various things, my deli cups up there. And that is a basic overview of the room. I'd like to start out the tour with my live food culture, starting with my daphnia and scud combo culture. Both of these species make excellent live foods for various species of fish as well as aquatic amphibians, and I made a video on how to culture them if you want to learn more. These yogurt containers are home to some of my microworm cultures. Microworms are cultured on a medium that has oatmeal as its base, although I also add other nutrient-rich substances, and you can see the worms in masses climbing up the side of the container. I love to feed these to my fish. They do really well on them. And they are small enough so that fish that are a little too small to take brine shrimp can take microworms, but they're of interest to fish that get quite a bit bigger than that. My endlers absolutely adore them, as do my multis. And here are my fruit fly cultures. Not exactly the most aesthetically pleasing thing to see, but as you can see, the culture itself is teeming with fruit flies. These are Hydei, the larger species that has wings but can't fly. And here is a melanogaster culture. This one is just about to pop. Basically, all those small pointed objects you can see attached to the side of the plastic are pupae about to hatch. I keep these, of course, for my dart frogs and my morning geckos, but they're also a great fish food, and I end up selling quite a few cultures as well. And here is one of my flower beetle cultures. There are thousands and thousands of larvae and beetles and pupae in here. Get you a look at that. You can see them milling around there. They're great food for dart frogs, for my morning geckos, as well as other small invertebrates and herps. Fish like them too, a lot of fish. They don't really eat the beetles, but they love the larvae. They're like tiny, soft mealworms. You can see some of them climbing around on the mesh there, hopefully, along with the beetles. These are extremely easy to culture, so they're nice to have on hand as kind of a supplementary food or a backup food. And we'll take a glance inside the cricket bin. I just did a little bit of cleaning in here and replaced the food and water. Most of the crickets, of course, are hiding in these tubes here. And I have several crickets on hand at any given time just because I need them to feed a variety of creatures, so I'm always culturing crickets. And it's been pretty successful for me. I really wish I could culture roaches sometimes because it's easier than crickets. But I do have a method that minimizes the smell and makes it fairly easy to do, all inside one container. This is one of my mealworm cultures. I use a very simple method that uses cocoa fiber as the substrate, and it allows worms, pupae, and beetles to all cohabitate, and it produces enough worms for my needs. As you can see, I collected just a few worms in a very, very short time from a couple of my cultures, and it's very simple to use this method. You don't have to worry about different tiers or anything like that. And since I'm only feeding my leopard gecko, vinegaroon, centipedes, and sometimes the chickens, this method is extremely easy and produces what I need. And last, but certainly not least, in terms of my live food cultures, are my springtails. These make a great live food for baby dart frogs, for very small geckos, various invertebrates, but of course they're also an excellent cleanup crew. So I maintain a large number of cultures. I think I've got 6 or 7 cultures here. Here I am in front of my Isopod shelves. I've already done a video featuring 19 different types of isopods in some detail, so today everyone's going to get a very brief cameo. I'll start with Trichorhina tomentosa, the dwarf white isopod. Then I have Trichonistidae species, the jungle micropod. I have several types of Porcellio, starting with Porcellio scaber wild type, Porcellio scaber calico, Porcellio scaber Spanish orange, Porcellio scaber dalmatian, and Porcellio scaber orange dalmatian, as well as Porcellio scaber morph mix. Then some other Porcellio species I have are Porcellio dilatatus, the giant canyon isopod, and last but definitely not least, the largest species of isopod I have, Porcellio hoffmannseggi, and in this shot you can see the orange one that showed up. So I'm very excited to be able to isolate these and culture them separately so that I have an orange strain of Porcellio hoffmannseggi, or titans. I have several other species as well, including Stylisticus convexus, the teardrop isopod, Oniscus ocellus, the skirted isopod, Isopodus species Tarragona, Nagurus cristatus, the dwarf striped isopods, which are not doing very well for me. And now let's move on to the Armadillidium isopods. I have Armadillidium vulgare high yellow, a strain that I am isolating, been working on that for a few years. They're finally starting to breed in decent numbers. I have Armadillidium nasatum peach, Armadillidium vulgare orange vigor, which breed like crazy, Armadillidium maculatum, the zebra isopod, one of my personal favorites, and Armadillidium klugi, or the Montenegro or clown isopod, which are also starting to breed for me quite well. I will be releasing a video unboxing 3 new types of isopods very soon, so stay tuned for that. And here is my smallest species of millipede, Anadenobolus monilicornis, otherwise known as the Jamaican bumblebee millipede. They're pretty diminutive, but what they lack in size they make up for in their interesting pattern and coloration. Here are a few of my ivory millipedes, some of the adults, and quite a few babies. I probably have around 40 at last count. I think I have more now because I just noticed some very tiny babies in there. So you can see this juvenile is starting to get the pattern of the adults. The babies don't develop it immediately, but they've been breeding for me pretty well, and they seem to be a very hardy, active, and of course very attractive millipede. And here are a few of my Spirostreptus species 1. These are all juveniles here. I have 1 adult and about 9 or 10 juveniles. They're about half the length they're going to end up being, maybe even less than that. They do get quite long and they stay fairly slender. They're a really cool millipede, and I look forward to this colony starting to produce young once they mature. And here, of course, is my communal desert beetle and velvet ant vivarium, which I really enjoy. The beetles ponderously patrol the enclosure while the velvet ants add an element of a different color as well as a lot of activity. Sometimes it's hard to avoid anthropomorphizing the velvet ants, particularly like in this shot where the velvet ants appear to be playing Queen of the Hill. And this creature is the first of the carnivorous invertebrates for the tour. I'm going to try not to get sprayed by this vinegaroon. He has sprayed me on occasion. He's pretty vehement about not wanting to be disturbed too much. Hopefully you can see him a little bit there. This is one of 2 vinegaroons that I've had for approximately 3 years. The other one is already down in hibernation. So this is the only one that's awake. He is not too happy about being moved, but I think I can move him a little bit so that you can get a better look at him, hopefully without being sprayed. There we go. This is a captive bred individual I got when it was very much smaller. They grow pretty fast every spring and summer, and then during the winter they tend to hibernate. This one for some reason has not gone down yet. They typically do go down in early December, so I'm puzzled why he's not going down. I may have to change out the substrate. This was a new substrate I was trying, and he just may not be used to it. Here's my Coahuila devil scorpion. I've had this since about June. It's extremely easy to take care of. It doesn't have a lot of requirements. It just needs a hide, so I always have this cork bark in the enclosure for it to hide in. It eats insects approximately once a week, and in the winter even less. And then it needs to be misted or to have a water dish in there so it can drink a little bit, but they have really pretty minor moisture requirements. So, and this is the first scorpion that I ever got. And this lovely specimen is a young Asian forest scorpion. There is a local breeder who produced this scorpion along with a lot of other scorplings, and I assisted that breeder in getting them to eat their first crickets and fruit flies when they were very small. And now I have one of them here, and I've noticed it's extremely aggressive when I spray water into this small deli cup. It tries to sting the water as it's spraying in. I'm not trying to spray the actual scorpion, but it does seem to react very aggressive to anything going on in the enclosure. But of course, I'm very careful and have not yet been stung, and I don't expect to be. And here is one of our 3 Scolopendra polymorpha centipedes. This is the one we've had for the longest girthing. We've had her almost 2 years, I believe, at this point. And here is another specimen of Scolopendra polymorpha, or desert tiger centipedes. This is one we purchased from Bugs in Cyberspace, and is now hiding because I have removed its hide. What unmitigated gall I have. Let's visit my Damon diadema, or Tanzanian tailless whip scorpions. Female's on the right, male is on the left, and I'd like to show you their spermatothecae, which are structures used in mating. The male basically produces these structures with a sperm packet at the top, and then the female, if the mating is successful, collects them. So, in not too long, I hope to notice that the female is carrying a pouch full of eggs. And here is my giant Asian mantis. This is the one that you may have seen in other videos that grew from approximately the size of a mosquito to this very large mature mantis. This is a female, and I'm a little bit perplexed about how she eats crickets. She usually will grab a cricket and then eat part of it and then drop it. I don't know that she's ever finished on a cricket completely as an adult. But other than that, she seems to be doing fine. This is the largest of my 4 aquaria, which house opaiula, or Hawaiian shrimp. You may have seen my time-lapse feeding video of these guys. I have hundreds of shrimp at this point, and they are one of the lowest maintenance pets possible. I just dropped a pellet of fish food in here, and they're starting to notice it and gather around it. Within a few hours, they will have consumed it entirely. I only need to feed them once a week or even less often. And now it's been maybe a half an hour since I put the food pellet in, and you can see that a number of shrimp have begun to gather for the feast. I do have a 5-gallon, a 3-gallon, and a 2-gallon opaiula aquarium in addition to this one, but I think you get the idea. And here are my blue Star Endlers. You can see I've got quite a few of them in here. I'm going to see if I can feed them in an area where you can see them easily. Maybe right over here. Giving them a few microworms to entice them to come near the front of the glass here. I've had these a little over a year. I believe I got them in October of last year. I started out with just a couple of pairs, 2 or 3 pairs of adults and some fry, and as you can see they've produced a lot for me, and I've sold off more than I originally had. Sold off quite a few, but they reproduce much like guppies, and so I have a large quantity here. The challenge for me has not been raising the endlers, but in keeping the aquarium in which they live fairly algae free, but because with such a bioload it's been a little bit difficult to do that. There's a fair amount of light in the tank, and I knew that it was going to be a challenge, but I decided I wanted to experiment, and so that's what I've been doing. And I think I've finally hit upon a solution that's going to minimize algae, and let me show you what that is. I mentioned it briefly earlier in the video. It's this patch of pothos plants. Now this is not my original idea, of course. There are many people who use pothos to help reduce nitrates in their aquariums, and I just decided to give it a go. This is a perfect spot since I'm right near a window here, and I put some of this plant, which I obtained from my parents. They've had a plant growing for about 30 years, so I know there were no pesticides on it, and just rooted it in the tank. You can see a lot of the root structure here goes all the way down into the gravel in several spots, and it has greatly reduced the algae. I've also got other plants in there. I've got some Pogostemon stellata octopus, a little bit of guppy grass in there, some Myriophyllum, some water lettuce, various things going on, but it really seems to be working now that I've got the pothos, taking advantage of atmospheric CO2 to grow and pull lots of nitrates out of the water. So I'm pretty excited about that. I do have a few red Riley neocaridina shrimp in with my endlers. You can see a couple of them nibbling on algae in this shot. If you've been watching my channel recently, you will have seen my update on the multis. They're doing fairly well, but they've been taking a break in breeding. I think I mentioned in the video, most of these are probably 3rd generation born in my aquariums, but for some reason lately they've not been reproducing a lot. But I think I may have solved part of the puzzle. Just the other day, I found an assassin snail in here. I thought I had put one assassin snail in here some time ago because I had some ram's horn snails and pond snails which will eat fish eggs. I put that assassin snail in and thought that it had since deceased and it had been dead for some months, but then I found it just a couple of days ago alive and well, and so I think it has probably been preying on the eggs. I wouldn't be surprised at all. And so I removed the assassin snail, put it into another aquarium where it's not going to cause any problems, and hopefully we'll be seeing some fry soon. Looks to me like that fish right in the middle of the screen, that smaller multi there, I know that that's a female, and it looks like she may be getting ready to spawn, so we'll see how that goes. Some of the other females in here look similar. I've been feeding them a lot of the decapsulated brine shrimp eggs along with other foods that should help entice them to spawn, so we'll see if it's just been an issue with egg predation, and we should know the answer within a couple of weeks. If that doesn't pan out, I may just have to get a few more multis from another bloodline to get things started again. And the room tour would not be complete without our goldfish. Pondy, the one on the right with the red spot on her head, and Rory, the smaller one on the left. These fish have been part of our family for a long time now. I think we've had Pondy for something like 7 or 8 years maybe, and Rory a bit less than that. I do understand that this aquarium is too small for even just 2 goldfish of this type. Ideally they'd be in an 80-gallon aquarium or larger, but currently we don't have an aquarium that large. I am planning on upgrading them when I can, and I've even thought about putting a pond, maybe a Rubbermaid tub pond outside for them. But I do keep up with water changes. I make, approximately 60 to 80% water changes, and my goal is to do it weekly, and I usually get pretty close to that. So the water quality does stay pretty high, and they're doing very well, despite the fact that their aquarium is just a little too small for them, but that is something that I plan on rectifying in the future. And now it's time for amphibians, starting with the dart frog vivarium with my 3 adults, 1 male and 2 female bumblebee dart frogs, Dendrobates leucomelas. I've learned to tell them apart individually by their patterns. The 2 to the left are females, the one on the right is the male. You can tell he's the only one that has a spot on the left side of his head and on the right side of his head just behind his eye. And then the little pelvic saddles are all different in each one. If you can see that, they all have unique patterns there. And then their shoulder patterns are subtly different as well. Not only are the frogs thriving, but the plants are doing really well. The rabbit's foot fern is starting to come back pretty strongly. The selaginella is just going crazy. This mini orchid just flowered for me. The lemon button fern's coming back. Some moss is actually starting to grow by itself right in the center of the screen. There's a little sprig of it there. And I also introduced some moss in various strategic points where it's doing well. And this bromeliad is sending out a pup. A lot of people have been asking how the tadpoles are doing. Well, here's the youngest one. Not only has it grown, but you can see the rear legs forming. This tadpole, which is about a month older, has recently acquired its forelegs, and of course a lot of coloration. And the oldest tadpole, of course, is a tadpole no longer, but a fully formed froglet. It recently graduated from eating just springtails to eating melanogaster fruit flies. I think it's been a while since we've featured my daughter's axolotl on the channel. She has trained it to eat from a target stick. It's very definitely associated the presence of the target stick with food. Its aim is still a little bit off. Sometimes it manages to eat from the target stick, but even when it doesn't, it definitely manages to find the food soon after. I hope you're enjoying the animal tour so far. I'd like to share a couple of things with you. One is that just by watching this video, by liking it, by commenting, by sharing, you're helping to support Aquarimax Pets, and I really appreciate the support. And if you'd like another way, or another couple of ways to support Aquarimax Pets, you can check out my merchandise page, which you can access by looking under my videos on most devices and computers. There's a link to the Aquarimax merchandise page where I sell t-shirts with various designs, mugs, things like that. I'm always open to suggestions for new designs as well, and I'm always thinking of new designs myself. So if you don't see anything you like, come back another time. I also have a Patreon page, and I actually have some patrons already. I really appreciate your support. And if you'd like to join my Patreon group, where you can pay a small amount every month to help support Aquarimax, I would love it. If that's not something you want to do, or something you can't do right now, totally understand. And in whatever way that you support Aquarimax, I really want to thank you for being an Aquarimaxer. Now, on to the rest of the tour. Here is Tiki, the crested gecko that we've had the longest, about 5 years. And she is a very chill gecko, but she's also done some pretty unusual things. She produced a son, Captain Squinty, about 2 years ago without ever having mated, since we got her as a hatchling. and she's never been unattended with a male. So that's kind of fun, and we're still waiting on the results of the shed samples being tested to confirm the parthenogenesis going on there. But something that recently surprised us even more is that she produced another offspring in the same way. Back around Halloween, we found a tiny gecko. And once again, she has never mated. And even though we own her son, a male, and another male crested gecko, they've never mated, but she has now produced a second offspring parthenogenically. We have high hopes that the second one will not develop the same eye deformity that Captain Squinty has. Here is Tiki's offspring, Captain Squinty. As you can see, his right eye is functional, but the left eye is really, there's not much left of it. It started out normally, but just never grew, and so there's very little left there, and the socket didn't even develop normally. So Captain Squinty's otherwise healthy, has a very good appetite, and does well, but he just can't see very well and has a hard time hunting, so we have to feed him by hand when we give him crickets. Jake is my own crested gecko. He's a Dalmatian, as you can see. He's got quite a few spots, not only the dark spots, but he's got some red spots. He wasn't very tame when we first got him. He has calmed down quite a bit, but he still occasionally takes a wild leap into the air. Other than that, he does pretty well. I keep the two adult mourning gecko enclosures side by side. These are both 12 by 12 by 18 exoteras. The one on the left currently houses the adults. I've got 5 adult females in here. Of course, they're females. Of course, this species is generally female. There's one right there. Just fed them some crested gecko diet, but for some reason they're shy. They usually go right after it. I may have spooked them a little bit. Now, this enclosure is not great aesthetically, I'll admit that, although I do love the Ficus species Panama growing in there. It's pretty cool. But the purpose of this enclosure is to provide lots of hides for the females and egg-laying sites. They will often hide in these floral tubes that are lined with dark paper. I've got a couple up there at the top, and then there's another one down here, and they'll hide in those. And I'm hoping that they will lay eggs in here, and then I'll rotate them into the other enclosure. This one here, there are quite a few eggs. You can see the sites where eggs have been laid, and there are eggs up in the corner there, quite a few eggs in other spots in the enclosure, so I'll let these hatch and then move them to the juvenile enclosure. I replaced the Bella palm that was originally in here with this ficus. I'm not sure which species of ficus it is, but it's got a thick trunk, looks kind of like a bonsai tree this way. I really like it. The only downside is that it grows extremely quickly and I have to clip it every week or two to keep it from covering up the light. Sometimes the mourning geckos are pretty good at sharing the food dish, but other times one of them just dominates it and the others have to hang around and wait until the first one has finished eating. Here is the enclosure for the juveniles. It's a small nano exotera, so it's just an 8-inch by 8-inch footprint, 12 inches high. The oak-leafed ficus on the back provides numerous hides, and then I also have a cork bark hide here that they use as well. So let's try feeding the juveniles. There are at least 4 in here that are at least a couple of months old each. I think they're all close to the same age here. We should see some popping out to go after these flies pretty soon here. Oh, nice shot. Got that one. See if I can look on the back and see what we can get there. We can see, oh, there's one up there, top right. About to catch one, nice shot. Here is our leopard gecko Pago in her bioactive enclosure.
The plants are thriving. The microfauna, the isopods and springtails, are also thriving. There are also mealworms that function as part of the bioactive crew as well. My daughter actually won this leopard gecko at a raffle at the Reptile Expo a number of years ago, and it was kind of stressful to think, oh, well, we weren't prepared for this, but luckily we were at a Reptile Expo and were able to buy everything we needed, and she has done really well for us. Lately, she's been in a state of semi-brumation, spending a lot of time in her cool hide, and we don't like to feed her when she's doing that, and so during the winter we feed her fairly rarely, and only do so when she's spending a fair amount of time in her warm hide. Otherwise, the food could start to rot inside her stomach, and that could, of course, be life-threatening for her. But all in all, she's doing great, and we really enjoy her bioactive enclosure, and I think she does too. This is our hypomelanistic corn snake. His name is Mr. Skeletal. My son named him that after a meme. We've had him for a couple of months now. We obtained him from someone who could no longer keep him when he was about 13 months old, so he's around 15 months old now. And he has been a lot of fun. He is very docile, easy to handle. He's eating well, putting on a little bit of weight. We got a scale so we could start measuring him. He was about 77 grams the last time we measured him, which is a little small for a snake of this age, but he is eating readily, and I'm sure we'll get to fatten him up. Apparently his previous dietary regimen, he was only eating about twice a month, and so we've increased that. So now he's eating about once a week. So he should start growing a little faster, and we all really enjoy having a snake around. And he's really beautiful, so he's a great addition to the Aquarimax family. We've got a flock of 10 chickens in a large run out in the back, and they have produced eggs for us in a variety of colors and shades. Of course, right now it's the winter, so we're not getting a lot of eggs, but in the spring, summer, and fall, we usually have so many eggs that we end up needing to share them with others, which we don't mind at all.
And this is Twilly, my daughter's budgie rigger, or budgie for short. He is, let's see, how old is he now? He's 3, and my daughter got him a few years ago for Christmas. He is very friendly, as you can see, and he does talk. You may have seen him or heard him speak in other videos. He's really camera shy as far as talking goes though, but I did manage to catch him on camera saying, "Hello, Twilly boy," so here's that. He is very demanding of attention. He loves to look right in your face and talk to you. He'll sit and stare at your mouth for hours as you talk. And if you're not talking to him enough, he will make his displeasure known very vocally. But he's a lot of fun to have around.
And the last creature on the tour is Cosmo, our cat. He's 12 years old. We've had him for about 8. And he has plenty of personality. As you can see here, he was bound and determined to sit in my daughter's lap even though she was working on an art project. Thanks for joining me for the Aquarimax Pets 15,000 subscriber tour. What was your favorite part? Let me know in the comments. If this is your first time here, I should let you know that I post videos every Friday, all on aquarium and vivarium pets. Please feel free to share, comment, like, and if you haven't already,
subscribe.
And then click the bell icon so you don't miss my next video.